Hello and welcome to today's Commonwealth Club World Affairs program. My name is Ladaris Cordell. I'm a retired judge and author of Her Honor, My Life on the Bench, What Works, What's Broken, and How to Change It. I am delighted to be moderating today's program. The club thanks the Bernard Osher Foundation for supporting this Good Lit event. Today, we are joined by two remarkable women, Karen Volbe and Karlia Shelton Benjamin. Karen Volbe is a journalist and author of The Swans of Harlem, 5 Black Ballerinas, 50 Years of Sisterhood, and their reclamation of a groundbreaking history. Her new book celebrates the pioneering group of 5 Black ballerinas, Lydia Abarca, Gail McKinney Griffith, Sheila Rohan, Karlia Shelton, and Marcia Sells, and the extraordinary contributions they made to the world of dance. Karlia Shelton Benjamin started dancing at the age of 4 and later became the principal dancer at Dance Theater of Harlem. She has worked with the Oakland Ballet over 20 years ago and started her own photography business. I remind our audience that if you have questions for Karen and Karla, please submit them in the YouTube chat and I will get to them throughout the program. Karen and Karlia, welcome. What a terrific read. The stories in The Swans of Harlem, these stories I found to be gripping and the writing is absolutely beautiful. I learned so much about the world of ballerinas and about the lives of these 5 amazing women. And I'm thrilled that their stories are finally being told. So Karen, thank you for writing this book and thank you, Karlia, for telling your story. And I thank you both for joining us in this important conversation.
Thank you for having us, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Karen, why did you, a white woman, write about the Swans of Harlem, 5 African-American ballerinas? What's your connection to them and the world of ballet?
Well, at heart, the connection is I'm the adoptive mother of 2 beautiful Black girls who are dancers themselves. Since the time they could walk, they've been dancing at Ballet Afrique, which is a Black dance studio in Austin, Texas. So I know how important a Black institution like that can be for a young person. And I think my adoration of my girls and my investment in their well-being is what spoke to the Swans. So when we first took a meeting, I think they were almost signing on because of my girls.
So that gets us to the next one for you, Karen. How did you discover the Swans? I mean, I like to believe I'm well informed about a number of things. I have never heard of these women. Mm-hmm. So how did you discover the Swans?
To the point of you never having heard of them, I mean, when I would be at Ballet Afrique before recital time, and I would be with the other dance moms, and we'd be pancaking our girls' shoes to match the color of their skin, I didn't know it was because of women like Karlia, who started that practice back in the 70s. The Swans, at the start of COVID, joined together and said, we're tired of our stories being erased. We need to do something about it. We need to take control back. And so they formed a legacy council. One of the Swans lives on the same Harlem block as a literary agent who was like, okay, magic is afoot. These women are incredible. Why have I not heard their stories? And she came to me and said, you should take a meeting with these women. And wow. We were off to the races from meeting one because they were as dynamic and beautiful, and their legacies are astounding. And like you said, I couldn't believe I'd never heard of them.
Amazing. So I have one last question for you, Karen, before I ask Karlia some questions. How long did it take you from very beginning to write the book?
Oh, man, Karlia, I feel like our first meeting was in 2020.
Yes.
And then right? And then it took
Mhm.
about 9 months for me to place an article in the New York Times. And that's when things really kicked off. And,
Hold on. New York
Misty,
Times article. Explain.
I wrote an article about the Legacy Council and about, I mean, I think the headline was the women saying we need to have a voice, which Carly, I think maybe even was a quote from you in one of our early meetings. And that New York Times article did sort of reverberate around the dance world to where Misty Copeland would eventually say she was reading that article on an Oakland Park bench, and it was the first time she
It's
had ever
amazing.
heard these women's names.
Totally amazing. Totally amazing. So now to the dancer. Carlia, how does it feel to finally have your story told? And a second part of this is, was telling your story to Karen, was it painful? Was it a joy or a combination of both?
Um, it feels surreal because we started out with this basic idea of just we have to get our stories out there. We have to get our history out there. And as Karen said, magic was afoot. And things just started to fall in line. And here we are today. Telling Karen our stories, I think it was very emotional. There were happy times where we would laugh, and then there were very painful times because it's our lives. And as in most people's lives, as in life, you have wonderful moments, and you have those moments that are not so great, but that you hopefully will learn from.
Did Karen meet with you separately, the five, or were you all together all of the time when she
Both.
was talking to you all?
Both. She started out with all of us together and was just listening to us recount memories, crazy memories of being on tour, of partying with Mick Jagger, of all of these things. And then she met with us one by one. She actually came to our homes and visited us and interviewed us and our families.
Wow. So this book is as much about, this is again my view of this, about the five Black ballerinas and your sisterhood that you all created, as it is about Arthur Mitchell, the founder of Dance Theater of Harlem. So I'd like us to talk about him for a bit. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember from reading the book, he discovered you, Carla, as well as the ballerinas profiled in the book. This is a quote from the book about Arthur Mitchell. He saw himself as God appointed. Arthur was narcissistic in a way. He didn't like others getting any undue recognition. He thought everything should be about Dance Theater of Harlem. As a dancer, you were part and parcel of the package. He never allowed anyone to get a big head. So I have to tell you that after reading the book, I came away admiring Arthur Mitchell and despising Arthur Mitchell, quite frankly.
Join the club.
Claudia, so I want to know, am I wrong about my assessment of Mr. Mitchell? So if you could talk to us about him and about the Dance Theater of Harlem, and take your time on this.
Okay. Arthur Mitchell was a very complex person. He was on a mission to build the nation's first Black ballet company. That was a very difficult job. And he tells me later in a private conversation on the phone how difficult it was and just some of the things that happened. He always let us know that what we were doing was bigger than ourselves. So we always kept that in mind. We were always humble. Humility was big. No one bragged, no one, it was just not done. Dance Theater of Harlem had a very familial environment, so that when you came into the company, you were adopted by two people, mother and a father, and they kind of showed you the ropes and how to maneuver within the company. And that was something that really was really important to all of us, because when Arthur Mitchell would go on a tear, or become, that head would flip around, there were people there to help you through those rough times, and they could be really rough. On the other hand, Arthur Mitchell he was a very giving person. He created a place for us to dance. We didn't have any place to dance. So he was giving in that way. He would make sure that nothing happened to us as a company. He was very protective. So, like I say, he was a very complex person.
Can you describe him physically for us?
Oh yeah, he was gorgeous. He was very well built. He had these incredible cheekbones, and he insisted that we all have that too, And he lit up a room when he came into the room. And that was something he taught us as well. He said, when you walk into the room, people should be, nudging each other, going, "Who's that?" And that's how it was with him. Whenever he appeared, it was like a light went on.
Interesting. So things, as I read in the book, would set him off in a bad way. And can you give an example? Like, what kinds of things would set him off?
Oh, a ribbon coming out on stage in a performance, someone not knowing the choreography, someone sitting down, especially an apprentice, during a rehearsal, because you were to learn everything. So you had no time to sit down.
Cornrows.
What's that?
Cornrows.
Yeah, hair.
Cornrows, good or bad?
He didn't like that.
Bad. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You're missing the most obvious one, Carlia.
Help me.
Wait.
Wait, of course. Yeah. But, that could be, it could be that you were heavy, or it could be that he just wanted to needle you. Because, like for me, for example, that was a sore point for me. I don't think I was ever fat. I mean, you can't be fat at 110 pounds, 107 pounds.
And how tall are you?
5'3".
Okay.
And at my thinnest, I was 98 pounds. So you can't. So, but he knew that was a sore thing. That was a sore point for me. It was a button for me. And so when he wanted to get to me, that would be the thing that would come out of his mouth.
Not good. So
No.
Since you brought up weight, was there a height stigma as well? I mean, you're 5'3", but wasn't she?
She's,
taller,
I think,
or-
5'7", 5'8", something like that.
So was there a height issue or stigma?
Well, not really. There were usually, so we went, if you see our lecture demonstration line, we went, up the stair. There were always two casts of things. There was the short cast and there was the tall cast. The tall cast usually got to go on first. They were usually the first cast, because he liked that tall, statuesque looking ballerinas, as Balanchine did. So there wasn't a height thing. Lorraine Graves was 6 feet, probably a little bit over 6 feet on point.
Wow.
So, and then our smallest person was probably about 5'1".
Got it. So we talked about stigma like weight,
Mm-hmm.
height, and there's another stigma you talk about in the book, and that the ballerinas talk about, and that's colorism. So, I grew up in a Black community, and there's an issue, darker skin, lighter skin, getting preference, all of that. So talk about colorism within Dance Theater of Harlem with Arthur Mitchell and ballet in general.
That's wow. Okay, so at DTH, I never really noticed colorism. I always thought that the person that was most suited for the role got the role. I had heard from some of my colleagues that they felt that way. So I can't really answer that from their point of view. I didn't notice it because it didn't affect me, and I didn't really see it. In the ballet world, of course, outside of Dance Theater of Harlem, the lighter skinned person would be more likely to get into a company than a browner skinned woman, or not necessarily with the man. The men were, I think, many artistic directors liked that contrast. But
There's
yeah,
that famous George Balanchine quote that he liked his ballerinas the color of a freshly peeled apple. Arthur Mitchell is a protege of George Balanchine. That's who
Right.
sort of raised him on stage. And so Marcia Sells, who's one of the Swans, who is darker skinned, said she did
Right.
feel when she entered the studio that there was just this subtle underpinning to favor that she, the daughter of a woman who didn't get into Spelman because she didn't pass the paper bag test, was sensitive to. And the two primas at DTH, the great Lydia Abarca and the great Virginia Johnson, are lighter skinned. Doesn't mean they weren't magnificent
right.
talent, but I think it is felt by some of the darker skinned women in the company.
So
And there were
interesting.
a couple of darker, browner skinned women. Susan Lavelle, who was absolutely amazing. Gail McKinney Griffith is a brown skinned woman, or was a brown skinned woman. And so, I think that a lot of colorism is just part of our society.
Yep.
I think it happens even with white people. I think that if you notice in a lot of the movies, maybe not so much now, but it was always the blonde haired, blue eyed person that was the heroine or the hero. The dark haired person and maybe olive skinned person was always the villain. So I think it's something that's, I don't know if I think it is a global thing. I think it happens in all races, Asian, uh, Latino, Latinx.
Got it. Karen, you wrote The Swans in three sections. You call them Act One, Act Two, and Act Three. So can you tell us briefly what each act is about?
Act one is these beautiful young women from all over the country coming together. And early press reports liked to paint Dance Theater of Harlem as this company of, quote, black slum youngsters. There was this idea of this like monolith of person that came to the company that's wildly stupid and ignorant. And just if you look at the five swans, each of their backgrounds are so unique. What they had in common was this calling for ballet. And as Carly has said, one doesn't disobey their calling. So even if the traditional ballet world can't picture a black ballerina on stage, well, Arthur Mitchell can. And so they all converge on Dance Theater of Harlem. And the first act is about the fight, the ride, the joy of this company just rocket shipping to global phenomenal success. Carlia danced for kings and queens and presidents. She performed at the White House. She traveled all around the world. It was a fantasy come true. The second act is what happens when a ballerina leaves the stage, and not all of them left of their own choosing. Then a woman who has trained her entire childhood and young womanhood to be perfect, to give the illusion of flightless perfection on stage, has to learn how to find her footing in the real world. And that's tricky and that's messy. And I think it's made messier when the world tells you that first act, that fantasy never happened. The third act, which is the real joy of the book, and it's what I feel like I'm getting to witness now as I'm traveling with the swans around the country, is the women taking their story back and coming together as sisters. They started meeting on Zoom every Tuesday afternoon. They haven't missed since. And they have made peace with their lives. And they have looked back on those years of dancing and touring and being ambassadors and being that ideal in the snow globe. And they've reclaimed it for themselves. It happened, they were there. Being told they weren't there was hard on their souls. But now, back in each other's company, these women have said, we're taking the stage again, and it is time we received our flowers. And so this is the joy of seeing artists back in the spotlight.
Wow, love it. So, Carlia, can you give us an idea of a typical day of training and dancing under the direction of Arthur Mitchell? What was it like? You come in, what time, and what happens in the room?
Yeah, you could probably get there around 9 o'clock. Company class was at 10. It was supposed to go for an hour and a half. It would usually go for 2 hours, and then there was a slight break.
What are you doing for those 2 hours?
Oh, we're taking class. So we're preparing the body for the rehearsals. We're refining our technique.
Can you be even more specific for those of us who have never?
So it starts out at the bar. We start out at the bar, and we start out with exercises and at the bar. After that, we come into the center and we do various combinations in the center without the bar, and you put your point shoes on, and you're basically each exercise you get, you're trying to perfect it. You're trying to perfect the steps within that exercise because you're going to use them all the time. After that, we would have a little break, and then rehearsals would start at 1. Rehearsals would go from 1 to 4. There was a little break in between, and then we had rehearsals again from 6 to 8. Now, if we were performing, we would go until about 4. We'd have that break, and then we would have the performance. So that would last, 2 hours? And we'd probably get out of there around 10-ish, 10:30, something like that. So they were long days.
Yeah. So when you had the rehearsals, which were all day, was this how frequently during the week? Was this every day, every other day? Did you?
Every day.
Every day.
If you're on the road, it's pretty, there would be a day off, usually
Right.
Monday, because the theater is dark on Monday. But in New York, when we were in New York, we would have Saturday and Sunday off usually, unless we were in season at City Center, and then we would get Monday off.
Judge Cordell, can I just quickly, for the
Absolutely.
lay person, I was lucky enough to attend a company class. The Swans did an event in Philadelphia where they were honored by the Philadelphia Ballet, and then they taught a master class for the company. It was so epic to get to witness as a layperson, but it is almost wholly these company classes, like the structure of them, and to have these like rows and rows of young dancers, and they come in and they're sort of fully dressed in leg warmers and sweaters and hoodies, and then as their bodies warm up, it's like the humidity in the room rises, and they start shedding their clothes, and it's astonishing to see bodies at work like that. It's like watching a dancer come out of a music box. Like, you can't believe what beauty a physical body can make, and just men's thighs and women's arms, and the idea that they would work and train their bodies. Like, Carlia, the idea of you doing that for 10 to 12 hours a day, of being at home honing your craft like that. I was blown away by 2 hours. It was operatic. It was like bodies and poetry. It was so beautiful.
I mean, dancers are athletes, and I think a lot of time people forget that. We work just as hard as any professional athlete. We just don't get the money that they get.
Got it.
But I did want to say one thing. At the end of each class, there's and this is globally in ballet, there's a thing called the reverence, which is when you come together and someone leads you through It's usually port de bras, which means arm movement, and then there's a bow. And this is a part of class where you're paying homage to the musician, the pianist, whoever's playing for class, to the person that taught the class, to your fellow dancers, and to yourself for,
Wow.
having your body get through that.
Amazing. Can you talk to us just briefly? Tell us about the point shoe.
Mm-hmm. Point shoe is,
I mean, it looks like torture to me, but
well, yeah, I think it was created by a man. No offense, but I don't think a woman would have thought of something like that. But it's made of satin and glue, just layer upon layer, and the part where you're standing is just a piece of cardboard, really a hard piece of cardboard. So, and then there's a shank at the back of it. So it becomes very flexible. The sweatier your feet get, or the more warmed up you get, the shoe breaks more. They don't last very long. You break a pair of shoes in for a performance, and you may not have them for the next performance, because depending on how hard you had to dance. Arthur Mitchell did not like noise on the stage, so a lot of times we would go through these exercises where we'd pound the shoes so they'd stop making, they wouldn't be as noisy. That was one of the other things that would drive him crazy too. If he heard point shoes on the stage, you would hear the heels right after the ballet. Whose point shoes were those? So they're a beautiful thing, point shoes. They're, once your feet get strong and your legs get strong, you don't feel pain really. I was talking to someone recently, and I said, when I first started dancing and I first started wearing point shoes, they were like $35 a pair. Now they're about $120 a pair.
Whoa.
So if you go through, if you have a lot of hard dancing, could be 5 pair a week. You do find ways to preserve them. We used to spray shellac in them, which would harden them up overnight. But then you wear them again and they soften up again. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Fascinating. Karen, one reason your book is so impactful is that the Swans are so candid about their personal lives. So how did you get these women to open up to you? And it's especially about the intimate parts of their lives that they had kept secret until revealed in your book. How did that happen?
Karen's a therapist. She's not listing that as one of her occupations, but she is a therapist.
So how did that work then? Start this.
Well, I think we came to trust each other. We were.
But you were the outsider. You have the dancers, and here you come along, and then that's why another reason this book is so compelling. It's for real. I mean, these women are talking about what they went through and revealing sometimes for the first time to their sisters about what happened to them.
I think that we worked really hard to build an environment where they felt safe. And I wouldn't do anything to hurt or exploit any of them. And I think also they, being genuinely curious goes a long way. Really, really thinking that Carlia's stories about starring in Serenade or being chased around a club by Mick Jagger are as meaningful and important as her stories of quitting drinking or finding a way to forgive Arthur Mitchell for some of his behaviors. I found the entirety of the women's lives compelling and moving. And these were also women who had not had a lot of people be curious about their lives as dancers, or or maybe even their lives off stage. Like, it was sustained curiosity. And I do find the women as valuable and moving off stage as I do on stage. And like anything, when one woman in the group is brave enough to share with me, oh, I'm an alcoholic and I'm nervous to tell them and I'm ashamed. And, um, life is messy. And one swan would share something in a meeting and it would make another swan feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I can share this too. And that's just female friendship in action.
Mhm.
And the women had this consistent routine of being in each other's company again. And I think consistent routine is what allows intimacy to
Wow.
grow. And yeah, it was a total honor. And it was really rewarding to watch the women learn about each other in the conversations, because they've known each other for over half a century and there still was beautiful things to learn and unpack. It was awesome.
Amazing.
I think
Amazing.
there are times, there are things that people tell you you should be ashamed of or that are bad. And those are just things that happen in life. That's just life. Like you said, life can be messy, can be beautiful. I don't know anyone that hasn't had any drama or painful events and times in their life.
Right.
But Carly, if you think about it, you were, as a young woman, told you were an ambassador of something bigger than yourself.
Yes.
Is it any wonder it could be hard later in life to be like, things weren't always perfect, and I didn't always make everything look easy, and I wasn't always. It takes a new kind of courage to think.
That's right.
Being vulnerable is its own kind of ambassadorship.
Yeah. So, we got wonderful questions are coming from those who are watching this. And I've asked some already, but another one is, Carla, can you share the best piece of professional advice that you've ever received and maybe who gave it to you? And what advice do you have for aspiring ballet dancers, the young ones?
When I was dancing, we had a coach named Bill Griffith. We used to just call him Mr. Bill because, well, and one time I had just had a breakup, and I guess he could see I could not get my footing. There was something going on, and he came to me and he said, "You have to develop a sense of loneliness." And I really wasn't sure what he meant by that. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just be alone and see. And when I went back to him and I said, I think I understand what you mean. And he said, no, you don't, because if you did, you wouldn't have to come back to me to say that. So I do suggest that people develop that sense of loneliness where you're by yourself, where there's nothing that can touch you, where you process your art and how you're approaching your art, how you're approaching a role. Are you just dancing it, or are you making it mean something that you want to share with the audience? I think I would suggest to dancers to really look at your situation and make sure you're happy where you're dancing. If you find yourself in the same role for years and not making any progress, go to another place. Check out their repertoire. Do you like it? Don't stay where you're not happy, because dance is a short career. And another thing I would say is don't worry about what other people think when you're dancing or about you in the classroom. There is that where you feel people are looking at you in a certain way. You can't do anything about that. Except the way you perceive it and the way you behave towards it. Put yourself in that little bubble and just dance.
Really quickly, Carly, I'm so excited you brought this up. Her talking about Mr. Bill's lesson in the book of how to be alone is one of my favorite moments. I find it so profound. And my father read the book and finished it this weekend and texted me that that was his favorite moment in the book. And I just want to read that.
Yes.
What he wrote. I suspect that for years to come, I will be holding on to Mr. Bill's admonition to Carlia, summarized at the end of chapter 16, that artistry has nothing to do with ego or audience or approval. It is authentic and comes from within. OMG. And
Wow.
to me, that's like, it's the
nice.
advice for any young person who dares to try is know what you're trying for. And it's
Right.
not for the outside, it's coming from within.
Yeah.
So
It's
beautiful.
about honoring your gift. You know what your gift is. It's the thing that you were given to express. So, after he told me that, I did start to understand what he meant. And one day I looked over at him and he just gave me the slightest of nods, like, yes, that's
got
what
it.
I mean.
You
That's what
got
I
it.
mean.
Yeah.
My dancing improved. I had a different approach to roles, to everything, to dance. So
Wow. That's great. So more questions from our viewers here. Carlia, do you have a favorite role or production that you were part of or one that you wished you could have performed?
I have both. One of my favorite roles was the stable girl in Equus. Equus is the story of the little boy he's not a little boy, young boy who fell in love with horses and idolized them. And she is the woman that was taking care of the horses. I love that role because I love horses. And so it really meant something to me. Graduation ball, I was the mistress of ceremonies, and that was a lot of fun too. I enjoyed doing Desdemona in Othello. That was really great. I wish I could have been able to dance the lead person in Allegro Brillante, which is one of Balanchine's ballets. I think that was the one that I really wanted. It was so me, and I thought, but I just didn't get around to it.
Will you just quickly talk about that transcendent opener of Serenade?
Oh,
Oh, yes.
Serenade is one of the most beautiful ballets I think I've ever danced. And I think many women feel that way because it is so feminine. And it starts with the curtain down. There's a bit of an overture playing. And when the curtain comes up, there are 17 women just standing still, really still, and just looking up at what could be moonlight, what could be a lot of things. And when that curtain goes up, it's so magical. And the first thing you do, I don't know if you can see me, the first thing you do is you break the wrist. And then it just has the most feminine of movements that just it's so fulfilling to dance. The music is beautiful. It's Tchaikovsky's Serenade for Strings. I don't know anyone that doesn't get something out of dancing that ballet, no matter what role you do, what place you are in that ballet.
And Judge Cordell, picture in the 1970s, 17 Black women on stage in the palest of blue tulle with their arm up like that as the curtain blows the tulle as it rises, performing to sold out audiences. These women 10 years ago wouldn't have gotten an audition in a professional ballet company.
Right.
And then look at what happens when they're given a stage. Imagine the magnitude of that vision as the curtain rised.
Right. Literally getting chills. I mean, it's just.
It was lovely. There was always applause just because of the stillness, the moment, the beauty of the moment.
Wow. Fabulous. I'm going to mention a name, and I want you to tell us what your initial reaction was. And then we'll talk about how maybe that it did change. Okay, here's the name, Misty Copeland. Okay, so.
I'll start.
All right.
I think she was the only And so when my girls were young, I was so glad to get a Misty Copeland doll. I was so glad to get Misty Copeland's books because here was this unicorn, this outlier that proved it could be done.
The first, remember, there was always the first Black
Yeah.
ballerina, right? Prima
And
ballerina.
all that pressure on those beautiful narrow shoulders. And she was the first at American Ballet Theater, but she was not the
The
first.
first.
And
Right.
like I say, the tragedy that she too learns about women like Carlia and Lydia Abarca and Sheila Rohan and Gail McKinney Griffith, that is a culture that failed her too. So I'll let Carlia go on, but one of the joys in the book is when Misty Copeland finally meets the swans on stage, and it is like the circle is complete.
Right.
You know, they have
Right.
brought her into the sisterhood,
Right.
and it's very beautiful.
It's
But
just, the tragedy of it for me is that that happened now, just now. With these women have been here, right? So go ahead, Cardia. Right.
I have to say that when I was happy to see her. She's beautiful, legs and feet for days. I was disturbed and a little frustrated when it started being said that she was the first, and it's like, well, wait a minute. There were all of us, the whole company full of Black ballerinas, and then there were people before us. So, but what I have to say is that Misty brought a big awareness to ballet and to Blacks in ballet. And she's a sweet person. We had a great panel discussion with her. So it was great to finally meet her. Like you said, it was
burst into
full circle.
tears.
She did. She burst into tears as soon as she walked in the room. Just at the shock of not knowing, that has to be, almost like a betrayal,
Yes. Yeah.
And so, but she has done so much for ballet and for people, especially for ballerinas of color, for there to be awareness, for there to not be this fear of coming out and expressing yourself in ballet or trying to get into a company. She's very encouraging, very positive. And so I think she's done a great thing for ballet.
Yeah, and I think, but for this book and your becoming known, she now knows she's not alone. Because I
Right.
imagine her journey, she felt, well, I'm the one. So, I mean, just by your now telling your stories by way of this book, change is happening. And so, if that is the case, question for both of you, what would you like to see changed or improved when it comes to ballet dance companies?
I would like to see a better representation of this country. I don't know. My question always is to the artistic director and the board of directors in companies, especially the big companies. Why wouldn't you want to broaden your audience? I mean, if you look at what Misty Copeland did for ABT, anytime she was going to perform, that house was sold out because there were all these little girls that wanted to see. They needed to see, someone that looked like them be this beautiful, ethereal person thing on stage. And so I just don't understand why there's this resistance to opening it up, broadening the vision, and including being more inclusive.
Is it just racism? I mean, is that really what's going on here?
Pretty good answer. It's a pretty good start.
Yeah, I think it is. I think
Why else?
it's something that happens in this country. I mean, with everything, but yes, it is racism. I think people have for so long seen it as a European art form, and that there was no place for anybody but, as you said, what is it? The peeled peach? What is it? A peeled apple?
The color of a freshly peeled apple.
Apple.
Right.
And you're missing the point of art. I mean, there are many people that can do this, and I don't know why the doors don't open a little bit more. It's better than it was, but it's 50 years later, and we're still talking about it.
Oh.
I'd also suggest companies take a real hard look at their repertoire and think about what stories they're choosing to tell in dance, what music they're valuing. So much of there's not one way to tell a ballet. There's not one source. There's so much vibrant, beautiful, colorful stories to choose from and to think deserve classical treatment. So maybe if you're opening your season again with Sleeping Beauty, like maybe you should think about that and think about what other magical stories there are to tell.
Right. That's a great point.
Yeah, this book is going to change a lot. I really believe that, and I believe for the better. So we got a question from the audience, and I'm going to ask the question, but before you answer it, so here's the question. What are the five swans doing currently? Are they still involved with ballet or dance? The reason I don't want you to answer it, because I like it to be a teaser for the book, because read the book, because you will find out, particularly in Act 3, what is happening with these women. But that being said, Carlia, if you'd like to go ahead and maybe say what you're doing, Life After Ballet, that's fine.
Right now, the book has sort of taken over our lives. Eventually, what our goal is for the 152nd Street Black Ballet Legacy is to be able to help young dancers, whether it be financially, coaching, mentoring, supplies, that kind of thing. We want to expose as many people as we can to the art form, and those that are wanting and can't, there's something holding them up. We want to be able to be there for them. I think the mentoring is really important, helping dancers to understand you must develop your own relationship with the artistic director. Don't, not say anything, and she will respect you for it. It doesn't mean running to them all the time, but let them make it so that you can approach them and they're okay, that you're both okay with that. I'm going to be working more with companies here in Denver. And that's it. That's all I'm going to say for now.
We'll leave the teaser. Karen.
One thing I
go ahead.
did want to say, which is heartbreaking and true, is that one of the swans passed last year. Gail McKinney Griffith, who was Dance Theater of Harlem's first ballet mistress and an exquisite dancer and an exquisite mother and an exquisite friend, passed away. And we always say, like, we still feel her very much, but it's wrong that she's not here. And there is some comfort to be taken from the fact that she put her story down on record, and that she said in one of our last conversations, at least I know my grandson will know me. And not this little shell version of her, the sweet grandmother, but this full, magnificent young woman who helped change an art form. This soft-spoken, quiet force of a woman who said, I was there and it mattered, and told her story. So it is sort of a reminder for all of us that this isn't forever. So leave your mark and tell your story. And thank God she did, because she was a wonder.
Yeah, she was amazing. She was Dance Theater of Harlem's first ballet mistress. And that's
what is a ballet mistress?
Well, they don't call it that anymore. Now they call it a rehearsal director.
Okay.
But it's the person that's sort of the go-between, the dancer, the artistic director, and or the choreographer. That person has to learn all of the ballets, has to be able to hold rehearsals for all of those ballets and know each part and let you know what part, if you're not doing something correctly. She also negotiates with the artistic director. If she sees someone that he hasn't noticed, then she will bring it to his attention and tell that person in turn, learn that because you're going to be in it. You know, I'm going to try to get you in it. She was a technician, just beautiful and clean. She was also my big sister in the company. I would stand in the back when I first got to the company, and she came to me one day and she said, "You need to stand in the front. We need for Arthur Mitchell to see you." And she gave me her place in the center, which probably doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but in the center, in class, everyone has their place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very rare that one person would give up their place for a newbie.
And when she invited you to do that, did you like, yeah, I'll do it? Or was it scary? Was it?
No, I wanted to get out there. I wanted to be seen. So, I mean, it was perfect. And I held that place until I left.
Wow.
Yeah.
Karen, you spent a lot of time with these wonderful women, listening to their stories. How has your time with them changed your life? We know how it changed their lives now, right? Has it changed yours? And if so, how?
I think that the greatest gift has been my daughters, who are 15 and 9, seeing me value some Black women's lives like this for a sustained amount of time, because that shows them that I don't just care about them.
Mm-hmm.
I turned 50 last week, and my daughter she annotated the book. I mean, I can't even believe the treasure that this is. But just like in the prologue, there's a paragraph listing all of the Black ballerinas, the grand tradition that Carlia belongs to. And my 15-year-old daughter writes in the margins, "Say their names." And I just thought, like, okay.
That's great.
Wow.
I don't care what else happens. I have this, and whether or not she becomes a dancer or sticks with musical theater or just, she has written in a margin to say their names. And I just can't believe the joy of that.
It also says that you're a wonderful mother, which is great. It's a compliment to you. Absolutely. So what do you think, and this is a question of both of you, is the biggest myth or misperception about ballerinas?
Ballerinas in general?
Or it could be about ballet. It could be ballerinas or ballet. Yeah.
Well, I want to say something that happened before the book came out, which is, I think, answering your question, a white woman, an acquaintance, asked me what I was working on and what it was about. And I said, "Oh, it's about these amazing 5 Black ballerinas from the 60s. And she said, "Oh, you never really hear about Black ballerinas. Like maybe because their muscles or curves, like you just don't really see,
Oh, God.
And it felt like, yeah, that's the exact these women had to deal with 50 years ago. So something that I fear about ballet is that it's still got oceans to go.
I mean, I would agree with you, is that there's this perception that there's a certain body type that can do ballet, certain feet that you have to do ballet. And it's just not so.
But don't you have to have an arch?
You do, but I've seen a lot of ballerinas, white ballerinas, that don't necessarily have an arch.
Interesting.
But they can dance. That's the most important thing, is how they express their gift. That's what makes a dancer. I mean, when I was dancing, I had a butt. It wasn't going anywhere. It was smaller than it is now, but it didn't stop me. That didn't hold me up from dancing. My feet weren't the best. Homer Bryant would take my feet and stretch them every single morning before class. and they became much better. I got the arch, I got more of an arch. So, when I hear things like that, it's just an excuse.
Mhm.
It's just, and a poor one at that.
Ballet belongs to everyone.
Everyone.
I love it. I just love this. So, Karen, you talked about your dad's response to the book. Have you had any other just people outside of family who have reacted to the book? And if so, what are you getting?
Just before our conversation began, I'm on a group text with some female friends, and a woman posted, like, I'm extending my walk because I'm listening to the audiobook and I just can't bear leaving the company of these women. So I think my favorite response is just watching people sort of fall in love with the women, and not just the performance aspect of the women, not just the ballerina sides, but like these grown, vulnerable, powerful women are just serving as like little lanterns for readers, and saying, like, no, you really can follow your calling. Just do it in the company of women who have your back.
That's
Wow.
right.
Oh, so
Yeah.
can you tell us about the audiobook? Who recorded it?
Yes.
And
And I'm glad my mother is not listening, because I did not tell her that I'm recording that. So there's our sections
that's
that
right.
have our
Have your
name.
names on them, right?
And we were able to record
Oh my
ourselves
goodness.
reading
That's
that. Yeah.
terrific.
My mom is vision impaired, so she has to listen to audiobooks. And I didn't tell her that that was my voice that she would be hearing. So,
Oh my goodness. So
And
go ahead.
Gail's beautiful daughter
yes,
who is a dancer herself, she records her mother's
our
section,
mothers.
which
Oh
is
this
just
is terrific. This is terrific.
It's
And Karen, do you record as well?
no. There's an amazing actress named January Lavoie, a stage actress, and she's gifted, and the recording is really beautiful.
Wow. And can you tell us how many hours it took to record the book?
I think it's like 9-ish. Oh, to record, I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's a 10-hour recording,
Got
and
it.
I don't know, Carlia, were you in the studio for a long time doing your section?
No, I mean, there were times when you're reading your life, and
That's
there were
amazing.
times where you just had to ask for a moment to get it back together. I think my session maybe was an hour at the most. At the most.
Wow. And a little more, Carla, about what it was like reading your life in a book that, millions of people are going to read. What was that like for you?
Again, surreal. It felt good because I've not only told my story to Karen, but I get to say my story out loud in the book. And I get to say it for my mom to hear it.
Wow. Yes. And by the way, you have
And anyone else that's listening.
you have a lovely voice, by the way, a lovely voice. So
Thank you.
absolutely. So, Carlia, knowing what you know now, okay, if you had it to do again, would you pursue a career in ballet, knowing all the stuff that was going to be out there? Would you do
Absolutely.
it again?
Without
Why?
hesitation.
Why?
Because there's nothing like being the music. When you're dancing, you are the music. You ride the music. There's nothing like being on stage and expressing yourself in a place where no one can touch you. No one can say anything. It's my gift. If it were my gift again, I would still do the same thing.
So let's talk about your gift. You started dancing, you were 4 years old. So,
Yes.
but where did this come from, this desire, this urge to dance? And how did you nurture that, or your parents or family nurture that?
Well, I think I started like most little kids at 4 years old. Your mom takes you there and drops you off, and sees if it'll stick. You take your kids and you introduce them to things and to see what will stick. I think for me was the fact that we performed Nutcracker every year, and every year you get to rise up and do a different part, a better part, or a harder part, a more challenging part.
Right.
And I think that's what it was for me. That ding, you want perfection. You want to get it as perfect as you can, and a perfect performance. I told the book and Karen, I think in my whole career, I had 3 perfect performances where everything was, it's like magic. It's like
You're like in the zone.
everything disappears except this, you and the music. And that's
Wow.
it.
Wow. And you got to experience that 3 times in
3 times.
Wow.
I will never forget.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So we have, it's amazing here. The time has flown by. We have reached a point where we have time for just one last question. So here it is. I truly believe that The Swans of Harlem should be made into a feature film. I absolutely, and I hope that happens. So my question to each of you, if this book were to be a feature film, who should play each one of you in the film?
I know my answer.
What's
which
your
is
answer, Karen?
nobody. Because I think the reason the book works is because it's not about me. It is about these 5 awesome women and the company they were a part of and the sisterhood that sustained them. So I, like you, look forward to watching the movie.
Wow. And Carlia, who should play you?
I think when I think about it, I see Zazie Beetz. I think I love the way she is in movies, in the movies I've seen her in. And I think she looks like she could be in my family. She has this sort of quiet force and presence that I think is me.
That's terrific. I love it. I love it. So thank you so much. We encourage everyone to please purchase a copy of The Swans of Harlem, please, and utilize our local independent bookstores as best you can. If you would like to watch more programs or support the Commonwealth Club's efforts in making virtual and in-person programming, please visit commonwealthclub.org/events. I cannot thank you enough, Karen Volby and Carlia Shelton Benjamin. You are fabulous women. This is a fabulous story, and I'm just so glad that the world now will know these five amazing women, the Swans of Harlem. I am Ladaris Cordell, and thank you all, and see you next time.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Judge Cordell.